Welcome, everybody, to the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Housing Committee meeting of February 13th, 2025. I'll take a quick roll call. Byron?
Here.
John?
Here.
Dagan?
Here.
Mary is absent. Megan?
Here.
Jen?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Andrew?
Here.
Tracy?
Here.
Move to Mary's
Beth.
seat if she's
Here.
And the assistant mayor says she's on her way. And go ahead and start. We're gonna need a minute taker. So we can circle back to that at the end of the meeting, but I've arranged to have some of our previous meetings transcribed, so we have a complete set of minutes, but we are looking for a volunteer. So,
Didn't we have AI for a while?
Well, I was getting transcripts from Kevin.
And I got the last two transcripts
Yeah.
from him.
So I was taking the transcripts and like feeding them in and editing them and then sending them to Howard, and then he was putting them together with his whatever he was taking, and I think that was sort of like the soup that was producing the minutes. But I hadn't gotten the.
So
Yeah.
will that work? Because I got the.
I could take the transcripts and like create
And then
minutes from them. Yeah.
From now on, I mean, I can take some notes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
The most challenging part of that is just that there's no attribution in terms of people.
right.
And so you kind of there's some, you have to go through and manually sort of,
Yeah.
but
So
yeah, it does give you a good starting point. Yeah.
okay. First up is Workforce Housing Trust Fund. I want to introduce the city attorney behind the mask. Here to join us, as you know, GNOD includes an element of a housing trust fund.
Make sure you're talking to your mic, because you're very
Yeah,
quiet.
I'm humble, yeah.
See, I'm not the only one that gets.
Yeah, right, but I'm too far away for anyone to kick me. So we had a previous workforce housing trust fund, but it really had out-of-date language, and the city attorney has been working with Beth and others. So why don't you introduce us to
Okay.
the document?
You might need I might need your
Microphone.
under the mask. Hi, I'm Susan Morrill. I think I know most of you, but those that I don't. And I'm behind the mask because half of the legal department is out with the flu, and I'm not feeling great, so it's a precautionary measure for you.
Would you zoom in? Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? So I did take the former Housing Trust document, the 2009, I believe, was the former trust. It never had a corpus. It never had any money put into it, the former trust. And it referred to prior policies, prior studies, etc. So I've just taken, made it more current.
Clean document.
And a cleaner document, and I've been working on various matters with the trustees of the trust fund on different trusts, so trying to bring some of the language more current for legal requirements for trust documents and for the trustees to feel comfortable that they are getting as much direction as they would need to administer the trust. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about the draft. I think it still needs a little more work in terms of the substance. There are a number of things that also on the legal end that we're still inquiring into. But the general idea is under your purposes, which is number 4, and making sure that that is consistent with what you want the Housing Trust Fund to be used for.
If I can ask a question, under number 4, since you brought that up, I am a little confused as to what we're talking about when we talk about manage and administer housing and programs.
So I think, my understanding is that with workforce housing or below market rate housing, that there is a constant management program, and that requires somebody to come in and make sure that the tenants who are living there remain qualified. So in thinking about how might we need money to further the goals of below market rate housing, I was thinking of all the different costs associated with managing ongoing. So once you have the property, you've built the housing.
The units,
You
yeah.
bring in your tenants, and then you have to manage the tenants to remain qualified to be there.
So would it make sense for it to say manage and administer housing applications and programs?
Sure.
Just because I feel like just housing, it's like, well, what are you managing? I just feel like there's a description missing, so it's my
be-
suggestion.
Applications, tenants,
Right, I just think it needs a little more description versus just the
Sure.
generality of
Yep.
just housing.
It's not like facilities management where you're replacing a leaky pipe kind of thing?
that might be more into managing the building itself. Yeah.
But you also have the other side of that, like, for instance, in the first-time homebuyers program, they have to recertify on a regular basis. Not that it's a big cost,
Right.
but that's the type of thing you're talking about.
Right, that's what I was thinking about when I wrote it. It may not have come out in the right words here, so we can always improve the language.
Okay. The one I had a question with is the retain existing housing. I know when we talk about, like, for instance, places you want to retain open space, and I can understand that, and I think the concept must be somewhat similar to that. But I think that for clarity and frankly for, legislative intent, for lack of a better term, what were you thinking about there? And I've got some thoughts, but seeing that you're the author, I'll let you start.
Well, again, I was mirroring the prior document a lot of, but being part of all these conversations about workforce housing, below market rate housing, and what the costs are associated with it. My thought for retaining existing housing would be having, maintaining an existing below market rate housing building. So maybe sort of structural or capital improvements to a building.
When I was thinking through it, the picture I was painting in my own mind was, for instance, you have a building that is housing and someone wants to convert it to offices. And that would be contrary to, what we're trying to do with providing housing. So are we talking about, like, let's use a couple of examples, or they may not be good examples, but I use them anyways. Let's just say that Peter Flores, as opposed to having apartments in his new building, wanted it to be all offices. So we took a building that had residential components to it, and now it's being rebuilt, if you will, for a different purpose, i.e. office building. In today's economy, that's not going to happen, but at some point it may. Would it be the intent, to try to prevent that? Is that kind of what the retain existing housing means?
No, I
Okay.
think it would be the word existing. So this is meant to live for decades to come, right? So at some point, Sherburne will be developed into below market rate housing. So let's use that as an example in 10 years from now. something happens and they need assistance with funds in order to retain the use of that building, or maybe 20 years from now, or 50 years from now. So I think that's more what I had in mind, was
Okay.
something that was already being used for below market rate housing, but needed money to assist to continue that purpose.
Mary, then Beth.
I was just going to reiterate, when we had the conversation in October going through the initial draft, it was always about retaining what was there and ensuring that, because I think there was the concern that some housing was going to come up for, yeah, end of use or end of
Yeah.
lease or something, and that's what it was for.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to reiterate that was the context, which I'm assuming you drafted
And,
this.
and it's my intent not to question that, but I think that having this discussion and, as I say, then it kind of helps clarify the intent as opposed to just having the words there.
Beth?
I guess I also had another thought in mind, like, so if there's an apartment building now that is all at HUD levels and it reaches the year end of that,
Right.
could we use some funds to incentivize an owner to extend that for another 10 years or something like that?
Yeah, good point.
That's the kind of thought I had in my head, not maybe there's something wrong with the building, but incentivizing private owners that already have, like West End Yards has those whatever many units that are at workforce housing levels. At the end of the 30 years, could we incentivize them in some ways to do another 10 years and have some?
Glenwood, like how we just
Yes,
lost.
yes, all of those. Instead of losing houses that are currently under federally mandated, let's try to incentivize them to keep them for longer periods of time.
Thank you.
So,
Megan?
It's just like it's a silly thing, but do we want it to say but limited to or but not limited to? Because say 5 years down the road, some scenario pops up and we have a creative solution that kind of falls within like what's going on with the housing trust fund, and like the intention and the end goal is good, but we're limited to, these 8 items.
it normally says but not
Okay.
limited.
It
So I'm
usually-
thinking,
yes.
Okay, I just
I
want to
think
be
that's more of a
sure. I
typo.
mean, like,
I think that might be a typo, but
those things, they
should
hold
have
up in
said that.
court, so.
can I just clarify before we go too far afield, retain existing below market rate housing? Would that be more helpful to continue to say existing housing, just qualify it as below market rate, or,
Well, because the whole thing's about affordability,
yeah?
I guess to retain existing affordable
That's good.
Yeah.
housing maybe might be a little bit more generic.
Okay.
Would you
Okay.
want to say the same qualifier for the,
For the new
yeah, construct
construction.
new?
Okay, I can repeat that, and
Yep.
each one, affordable?
Yep.
You pref- okay.
Construction of new affordable housing or retaining existing affordable housing.
Should we use below market
Well-
rate? Because, yeah.
Affordable has a very distinctive dollar value
Yeah.
to it.
Yes. I love the term below market rate because it, again, as we've talked
Can
about.
use it either
covers
way.
From
Yeah.
20 to sometimes even
Okay.
100%.
Change affordable to below market rate. It'll make others happy,
Yeah.
and I don't care.
Not to jump backwards, but I'm confused as to why in the very first whereas it says especially the supply of below market rate housing and not specifically. I mean, I'm sure there are advantages to having the Portsmouth Housing Trust Fund be available for projects that are not below market rate housing, but by my understanding, that's the entire intent of this trust fund.
I'm trying to,
Well, I
So it
think
says
where you're at.
especially the supply of below market rate
Oh.
housing options. Why not specifically or exclusively?
I don't think so. I think this is just more of like they're verbalizing the goal of
The city council.
City council. So it's not necessarily tied to the trust itself. It's saying we're reviving this trust because of this goal.
Okay,
And that, I think, is our specific goal that's in our list of goals.
great. I do have another thing in number 4. One of the housing trusts that we looked at that had great success was the Upper Valley Housing Trust Fund, and they were able to loan money at a friendly rate and then
1%.
Yeah, and then accrue interest on that, and therefore add funds to the trust fund by essentially being a bank. And I don't know if in the language as it exists up there, there is something that allows for that, but
no,
we
that's,
saw, I think, they took 1 million and turned it into 10.
That's beat a lot of 1%.
It started with 9 million.
Okay, well, they started with 9 million and they added $1 million into the trust fund. But it's a mechanism whereby funds can
I
be
put some
raised.
money in that account?
I'm not sure our trustees are in a position to do that or have ever done that. So what town had that?
It was the
Upper
upper,
Valley.
yeah, the Upper Valley.
But then what, Mascoma? One of the banks was involved in that.
There was a bank
Mascoma is
involved.
probably
I think it was
one.
Mascoma.
I
That was
think
entirely private.
Well, if we're establishing a new
Wasn't
trust
a
fund,
city.
I couldn't,
You two
It wasn't
need
a
to talk
city
closer to the mic.
fund.
Yeah, so they call it the Upper Valley Affordable Housing Trust, but it really refers to like the Upper Valley Loan Fund, which was private, primarily put in by funded through those. I think it was like 2 banks, or at least
Mascoma,
And
and
a bunch
then,
of employers.
yeah.
and then I think Mary Hitch was involved.
Yeah.
And also Dartmouth.
I mean, we've partnered with the bank on the new home buyers fund. Why couldn't we partner with the bank on this one?
Yeah. That's it.
What, Dagan, sorry, your suggestion is to allow us to lend money?
To lend money and then to,
What would prevent us from lending money here?
that's my question, is I don't see that in the language. I mean,
Could you just lend money from the trust to retain existing below market rate housing?
Again, I think it goes beyond
The scope
what
of the
we
trustee.
normally have as a scope of a trust and what the trustees are
Comfortable.
allowed to do because they manage the investment and then they only disperse money as directed by the city council. And I've never seen it done as a loan. That's not to say at some point we couldn't create some version of that, but it may not be a trust as this is anticipated to be a trust. So a loan fund like the new home,
First-time buyer.
first-time home buyer program, that would be a completely different beast.
And that's
really.
funded by a bank.
But there's nothing,
I do.
this could vary, I see no problem with the trust having $500,000 and saying, we're going to loan you $100,000 for 10 years to manage and administer housing and programs.
and we're
But
gonna
it's a
collect
loan
interest
instead of a
on it.
grant.
Yeah.
There would be a lot of financial, legal provisions that we'd have to examine before anybody would be doing loans. And who would we make loans to, and at what rate, and what would the interest be, and how would you follow through? I mean, the
Right.
trustees really aren't set up as a bank.
It might be cleaner that if there's a local housing fund, like Upper Valley, that the housing trust fund dumps a donation of money into that. And then
Or perhaps it's an amendment we can make to the first-time home buyers. Feel like I keep mangling the name of that actual trust fund, but,
Me too. It's not a trust fund, though.
It's not a trust fund.
Not a
So
trust.
Not a
that's-
trust.
It's a program.
okay, well, maybe that's something we could amend to that program.
Eric's been waiting patiently.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the discussion is interesting. I'm aware of a revolving loan program with fishermen, but it is completely administered by the bank. And it's a 75-25, so that, so that funding, there's templates that we can look at that I think this money could be used for. But I think the administrative process of the trust, loaning the money is a little bit more complicated, a lot more complicated, I think. But if you have a bank involved that can, oversee that, it's a much cleaner process. I know this revolving loan fund's been around for 20 years.
Let's take a
One default.
couple more on this and wrap up on this topic.
Does the city currently own housing?
The city does not, the PHA does.
So
Well, we own 2 defaulted properties.
that's right, which kind of goes to my point, but when we say purchase and rehabilitate existing housing, what are we purchasing?
I see that more as giving assistance to somebody like PHA who sees this project, something's available, a 4-unit or whatever, but they don't have all of the funds in which to be able to do that, and they're going to keep it affordable, so we could have, a request, something like that, to go towards a purchase.
Sure.
But it wouldn't be the city themselves. I don't see the city themselves going out. I see them buying land and then leasing it. I see them, so that's one of the ways the city would owns lots of property that has leased
That's the bullet
out.
point number one. So my hesitation at purchase and rehabilitate existing housing or construct new housing, retain existing housing, it has always been my understanding that the city does not want to own housing.
That's right.
And so,
Assist in the
But it's-
purchasing and rehabilitation of existing housing?
And the
Assistance too, maybe.
the difference being, now that we're talking about lending money or loans or financially contributing versus actually taking action physically, is I think the city can borrow money at a better rate than any person out there in the retail world. So why would we not just say we are retaining the money and then administering the money based on the borrow or capacity needed from a certain project? So, like, if it's a smaller project, like if somebody buys those defaulted properties and they say, yes, we're buying them with the intent to make them affordable or low-income housing, now we can participate, and that satisfies kind of this bullet point. Right now, it just reads as the city kind of wants to purchase and rehabilitate existing housing. It's very short in that.
So currently, Sherburne, for instance, and even out here in our housing out here in the parking lot and other housing, there's a ground lease. So we own the land,
Right.
but we don't own the housing.
Right.
And that will be the same for Sherburne. So I was thinking of, in terms of acquiring land for development of housing, not that we would own the housing necessarily or do the actual development of the housing. Again, with the loan, that's a new twist for our conversation tonight. And it's a complicated process and sort of out of the bounds of a normal trust document for a loan or a revolving loan fund or partnering with a bank for loans. So that I can't give you really great definitive answers on that tonight, but that's the intention of, in acquiring land, is to acquire land for the purpose of creating housing.
So just a simple addition of like a word might help. So what if we said the distribution of Portsmouth Housing Trust funds may be used for activities, and then it makes it so it's less about the city and more about the actual monetary component?
Yeah.
Because I hear what you're saying.
And the other half of my thought process is it may not go directly to the housing, but it might go to improving infrastructure tied to a certain site. And so if that is the case, like say they needed a larger water line, that's not necessarily contained within these bullet points. And so I don't want to limit it to the purchase and rehabilitation of existing housing, although sure, adding a larger water line may be considered rehabilitation, but it's not directly going to that housing unit. It's kind of the greater scheme and project scope. That to me, or a lower tax rate associated, an abated tax rate or tiered tax rate to go specifically to a project or development, may be more effective than giving them the money directly.
So those bring up all kinds of other side issues in regards to city financing, city CIP work, infrastructure work, and how we assess property and do tax abatements. So all are great ideas, but I think they go a bit beyond what a housing trust fund would accomplish.
Yeah, and I don't want to get distracted from this, but that's also on the agenda tonight, and so that's
Right.
kind of my thought.
Okay. One more.
Sorry, go ahead, Beth.
I just was going to say, and adding to that, I think if instead of just saying purchase and rehabilitation, we could say assistance with parties purchasing and rehabilitating sites and structures or, for housing, something like that. I just think if you reword it a little bit, it would soften it and it wouldn't just mean, the city, looking like the city's buying a house.
That's the way it reads right now.
Right. That's why I'm saying you could feather out some of those words and I think add to it and it'd be fine.
Okay.
Although Megan's edit would be more applicable to every bullet point rather than just
Correct.
one.
No, I
It
agree.
could all be additions.
Yeah.
I was, this might be out of the scope for this, but in October we talked, or maybe I suggested, and I don't remember where we landed, but I want to re-suggest it, the opportunity to provide subsidies and grants for ADUs.
Yeah.
Does that still have a home in something like this, or would that have a home elsewhere? And I can't remember exactly where the city is on that process either.
So our ADU handbook is, it's done and disseminated right now.
Okay.
But I don't know how everyone else feels. I don't necessarily know. I don't particularly always see ADUs as affordable,
No.
solving the affordable crisis. I view them personally as like what we're seeing most of them used as is generational housing, whether that's housing parents or housing children as a mode. But I mean, I feel like talked about how they are pretty expensive. So I don't know where.
It was just a
Fall
thought.
under here is construct new
Yeah.
below market rate housing.
Yeah, I guess I would.
Were to agree to keep your ADU.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It was just as we were, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
That gets into a lot of personal finance and personal property rights, however. And so if you tie that, if someone even agrees to it and says, oh, I'll just use it for low-income
And then you're
housing,
changing your
and then they
deed.
sell it, then that's a burden to that property.
That would be within the rights of this trust to do.
To burden
How
the
they
property.
execute that, they'd have to figure out. But it's the bullet points are broad enough that
Yeah.
they could
Any
look at it.
other input for city attorney?
Well, I guess, I mean,
As of now, you're not ready to submit this. You think there's going to be additional language before it becomes, ready for submission to the council, right?
Right, and what I want to do is have the trustees of the trust fund look at it. They have a meeting scheduled next week on Wednesday, the 19th. So if you want to refer it to them, then I'll be making additional edits and providing it to them, and they'll be looking at the mechanisms as they need to in terms of how they can invest the money and what is required for them to distribute the money, making sure it's clear enough for them. And then they would refer it to the city council.
Okay, so if we could have a motion to refer this to the trustees of trust fund.
Did we
Trustees
get
of trust fund.
to the bottom of this?
Can I ask just one quick question? Does this have to be approved by the Attorney General's office because of the trust?
It will go to the charitable trust division, yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be registered there.
They'll be registered there. Do they make changes, or do they just accept as presented?
They accept as presented, but they monitor how it is used, and they audit the trustees and in their distributions. But I've been in touch and discussed a lot of this with the charitable trust divisions.
Thank you.
I guess just one more point, and Andrew, you kind of made it trigger. So with the first-time home buyer loan program, there's like a balloon that just kind of sits there, and then when you sell, you either have to pay it back, or if you now sell to a first-time home buyer, then you kind of get it grandfathered in. There's nothing in this trust that talks about like timelines or like how long something has to remain below market rate if you receive these funds, and I just don't know if that's something that would be prudent of us to add to this. Because I could, build something and ask for $200,000 and keep it below market rate for 2 years and then do whatever I wanted at this point. I didn't see anything unless I missed it.
Well, the trustees make a determination whether they're going to provide the funds, correct?
Yeah, I guess the question is whether it comes with a covenant
Yeah.
along with it is what you're asking. and-
Correct.
And that's a good point. So let me see how I can work that in.
Yeah, or if we could say long-term affordable
Permanent?
housing.
I
Permanent?
think permanent.
Permanent.
The word we
Well,
want.
if money's being dispersed, it's
Yeah.
going to be an approval of the city council, so they truly could put those sort of tags on that as
Yeah, well,
well.
why would you say permanent if no other low-income restrictions are permanent?
Correct.
They're generally,
They're
well,
20 to 30 years,
Right,
50 years at most.
right.
Although Sherburne is more than 50 years, right?
That's
No,
what-
Sherburne's permanent.
Yeah.
Ground lease is
Yes.
that.
So
but
you're
the
talking about the,
Actual funds themselves and
yeah, when you're
stipulation.
looking at the HUD funds, yeah, and that regulation.
we will look at that
just
issue.
Term. Yes, Byron?
I was just clarifying, so the council makes a decision, and then the trustees are the final word in terms of like if the funds get, like, what's the power structure there?
So the way that the trusts are set up, they have a clear indication of how the trustees should distribute. And under this one, it would be the city council with the city manager telling the trustees, they would take a vote on distributing the money from the trust fund and ask the trustees to make that distribution. Then the trustees would just have to satisfy themselves that that request is within the framework of the trust. And that's sort of the oversight of the charitable trust unit for the Attorney General's office as well.
If I could just add one thought. We saw examples in the material Andrew sent us from Urban Institute, and just add a bullet point for provide direct subsidies for rental and or home buying. Because there's a number of cases where the Housing Trust Fund provides that little increment between what somebody can afford and what the rent is, and in the form of grants or.
Direct subsidies for rents or purchase?
Yeah.
It's hard to anticipate all the different ways in which somebody may come to the city and say, I would like money from your housing trust fund, and it's difficult to anticipate. So the intention is to make it broad enough to give them leeway, but make sure it doesn't expand beyond your intent and the intent of the below market rate housing.
Well, the question too is, some of the, as we talk about loan funds, some of the revolving loan funds from like Concord or places in New York and things also have and again, this is not for this, but also have stipulations in there to like help people stay in their homes. So like if you need a new roof, you can use the revolving loan fund. You need a new water heater and you're below, again, a median income, then you can like use that revolving community loan fund to be able to stay in your home.
Right.
That'd be great.
Right. Yeah, John?
I'm just going to try to take something that's very broad and try to concise it. Many meetings ago, Tracy talked about people who are in a home rental, it gets sold, and they want to stay in Portsmouth, but they can't afford the deposit. And, I've given that all kinds of thought, but I think that's one of the other things that might come into play here. I know that certainly our welfare department does deal with people with rental situations, but I think from what I heard Tracy say, and I do listen, that the individual who, is priced out of their current apartment, and or someone buys up their apartment and now requires a deposit. Is this a tool that we can use this far, and is there a way? And the only thing I was thinking is, initially I wasn't getting the concept, but because I think that, that's kind of giving money to somebody. But as long as there's a mechanism so the city could get that money back if the person moved out or whatever, that they wouldn't get their deposit back, the city would get it. But that's kind of.
That's the loan.
Yeah, it is, but I mean, is that something that can be included in that,
So at the city attorney's suggestion, if we had a motion to refer this to the trustees of trust funds.
So moved.
Second.
All in
Do
favor?
we get to see it again?
Yeah.
Do we get to see it again?
Because we made some.
Motion is to refer this to the trustees of the trust fund.
But the report back.
changes we discussed today.
Yeah, with incorporating input from the housing committee.
With the possibility of reviewing a final draft. Before it
That
goes
would
to,
be an amendment. Is there a second to have the Housing Committee review a final draft?
Well, if I can, seeing I'm the maker of the motion, I guess I can question it. I mean, I don't see us changing anything that the trustees want to include in the document.
No,
I
but it's
mean-
about seeing the verbiage that has been incorporated.
Pardon me?
It's about seeing the verbiage that's been incorporated from this meeting forward.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's more their document than our document, as far as I'm concerned. And they're the ones who, have to administer it. But, I mean, if it wants to come back, fine, as long as it doesn't delay anything unnecessarily.
I think we'd want a second for Eric's amendment.
I'll second it.
Okay. Let's vote on the amendment. All in favor of the draft coming back to us?
Can I ask the attorney if that's an issue?
Well, I'm just wondering, timing-wise, when you would be meeting next.
Well, not till March, mid-March, the 13th.
13th of March.
And then the next council,
17th.
So we'd miss the packet.
you'd miss the packet, yep. So you'd miss the packet for the city council meeting on March 17th, unless you meet sooner than the 13th.
is there an urgency for this?
There is some. There are timelines, but they can be extended in terms of what's anticipated for deposit of money into
To
the
get money
fund.
coming in, they got to have
Yeah.
the document in place before the money comes in.
Is the money there to be,
Yes.
There's 500,000,
500.
yes, to be
I
released
know,
and put in.
but when is it going to be, when is it actually going to be real cash going into the fund? Is
It's
it,
anticipated in 30 days that it would go into the fund. The
So-
money's available and ready to go, but it's anticipated to go in 30 days. It could always be a little longer than that. I'm not sure what our meeting is, city council meeting after that in March.
We did not edit the document so severely that it needs to be torn apart and remade. Is this something where, while we discuss other things, the edits can be added, and then at the end of the meeting, we can go over what's been added?
No. I won't be able to accomplish that trick for you tonight.
May have some other changes.
And they may have some other tweaking to do, but I think we're more concerned with the trustees with legal issues than the purpose. So I think I understand your
When it-
concerns about the purpose.
When are the trustees supposed to review this if we refer it to them?
If you refer it to them,
19th.
they meet next week, the 19th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and they may not be able to get all of their work done in the one meeting. I'm happy to share the draft,
Yeah.
but have to be careful about how we do that. I'm not sure how, then if I'm going to get comments back, so.
Well, you could share it, and if any members felt we needed to meet, they could contact the chair or chairs.
I would encourage everybody to move this along and not let this committee become a cog in the wheel. I think that the legal department, the trustees, and the city council have a lot of good judgment in that they can administer this. I think the intent of it is our job. It is a balance between broad enough to meet the purpose, but not go crazy. And I think it does that. I wouldn't want to put myself in the position of wordsmithing this because that's not my expertise.
Yeah, okay.
So we're going to vote on the amendment? And the amendment is that it comes back to us
In March
in March.
for review.
So it would be, yes, I want it to come back to us, or no,
It would be, yes, you want it to come back to us.
okay.
No, you don't want it to come
Can I
back.
have a roll call, please?
Sure. Byron?
No.
John?
No.
Dagan?
No.
Jen?
No.
Megan?
No.
Mary?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Tracy?
No.
Counselor?
No.
Assistant Mayor?
No.
And I would vote no as well. Now we need to vote on the motion to refer to the trustees of trust funds. All in favor?
Aye.
The edits that we
With,
discussed.
that's
With the
a
edits,
key
yes.
point, please.
No edits and then bring it back.
Obviously, you will see this in packets, and you will see the edits.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome. I don't know if I'm staying for the next conversation as well.
It'd be great if you could.
I guess, Peter,
I was at-
it
I
didn't
was-
work, Peter.
All right, Susan.
So close.
I was asked to stay a little bit longer.
We put on the agenda the item of disposition of city properties. Jen Stebbins had suggested this at our last meeting. In light of the process we went through with Sherburne, can it be improved? Really, I think where we were going. So, if you'd like to,
Yeah,
and pull your mic up
Oh,
if you
sure.
could.
I have been doing a lot of thinking about how Sherburne went and the outcomes from Sherburne. And I heard very strongly a desire from this committee and I think the council and a lot of people in the community that for our next project, we pick POA. And I also know that on our agenda today is looking at more city-owned properties. And the more I thought about how the process went and the outcomes of Sherburne, I sort of would like to suggest to this committee that we bring POA on sooner than we brought on a developer at Sherburne. And I think that having a low-income housing or below market rate housing developer in our corner helping us pick either a city-owned property or, based on last night's news, advising the city on what parcel they may or may not accept in the GNOD would be really beneficial. Because I don't think any of us in this room, myself in particular, have the expertise that an affordable housing developer would have to look at a site and say, ooh, this one makes a lot of sense because it's next to 2 bus stations and that really helps me with LIHTC credits, or this one's got a lot of site work and that's gonna make my costs balloon. And I think bringing somebody on earlier would help. That's my 2 cents.
Second.
Is it,
Do we, could you say what you wanted POA to be
Yeah,
part of?
I think rather than finding land or picking land and then going out to choose a developer, I think we pick a developer who can then assist us in choosing land. Whether it's city-owned land that we have right now, or in the case of the GNOD, the city, I think, will be able to say yes or no to some parcels that that developer may be offering to the city. And it would be helpful to already have the developer in our corner to help us evaluate those parcels.
Do you think?
Okay, we got
Go ahead.
Byron, and then Eric.
I think the mechanic makes sense to me in terms of having someone who's has expertise in helping with which choose the site. My only concern with like having a specific developer and not some other independent entity is that they're sort of, and maybe that's the intent, right? Is that like it's POA and that we want to work with them.
We vetted them, yeah.
We vetted them, but yeah, my only concern is that it's that maybe there's some conflict with that, with like having the developer picking the land as opposed to like some independent person who's equally qualified but not also in the driver's seat in terms of the project itself.
Conflicts? City attorney?
It's not exactly the question I was anticipating.
Yeah.
Well, how about if I answer the question I was anticipating first? We'll see if we can go from there. In terms of, could the process be different next time? Yes, the process could be different next time. So through the process, generally through the procurement process, the city manager and city staff run the RFPs, RFQs, and procurement. and make decisions as to who the partners are. Now, as everybody is well aware, the Sherburne became a very political issue, and the neighborhood was very upset, and a lot was going on, so the city council decided to have part of that.
Excuse me, and the city manager permitted the council to have part of that.
Yes. So, in the future, it really is, up to the city council if they want to be part of it or not. There's certainly a process for them not to be part of it and not to have it being multiple public hearings, et cetera. And could you even get away from the RFP process? Yes, you could, because we've just gone through it. We've just gone through the RFQs, the RFPs. So there is a process, and internally with the staff and the city manager, that the next developer could be chosen based upon the process that was just gone through. So I think that that is done in other contexts where there's been a like bidding process, even in a different city. So everybody's aware of who the lower bidders are, or who's qualified, et cetera. So that negotiation process could go ahead. But again, it's kind of goes back to, as long as the city council doesn't decide that they want to have part in the process. But it can go forward that way. And it doesn't necessarily require the formal RFPs that we went through before, because we just went through it. Now, if it takes a year or two before there's another piece of land for which we need a developer, then at that point, maybe you want to do a little more process again. So that was sort of the question I was ready to answer. The question about bringing in POA or some other developer to help assist you in picking a site is a different question that raises just for me. Like, you're going to have to work out a contract and pay them money. So where's that money coming from was my first question in my head. And that would have to get authorized and go through the process with the city council, because it's not necessarily in the budget. So that's one stumbling block I see, but.
You probably don't have to pay them money if you enter into a contract to,
I would
So I think there are other considerations there, and I think that obviously that would be in the purview of the city manager to make that type of decision, or make that type of authorization if you want to make a recommendation to the city manager to do something like that, and have her report back or report to council, et cetera, go through that process. That might be the way to accomplish, or get an answer to the question that you're asking.
Well, anything we do is basically just a recommendation anyway. So,
Yes.
if I can just pick up on, if we move forward with something akin to what Jen suggested, I mean, first of all, even though we've associated a firm with it based on our prior experience, the manager can, make a determination whether or not that's where she wants to go, because as I was told when I first got involved in city government, the council decides what to do and the manager decides how to do it. And that's really the way it works. And so the manager does have the final say, and whatever we do is just a recommendation. But I think that it's worthwhile to make that recommendation.
So,
He's been waiting.
Andrew?
I 100% agree with the evaluation consideration there. Like, yes, having the actual developer in the room with you to execute that and do that analysis is very helpful. I don't think it's wise to select one specifically, because now you're removing the open market component to this entire process. And while, yes, it is a nonprofit, low-income housing consideration where there are fewer players in the game, it still should be an open market process.
What would the market be then? Normally, when you talk open market, it's like highest bidder, but there's not a bidder here.
It's not necessarily that, but how do you know that POA is going to be available at the time that we are ready to dispose of this land? So, as she just mentioned, if it takes a year for us to have these discussions and for the community to be involved in the discussions and to go through that process, now, is POA even available? Have they been bidding on other projects, right? Like, there is a certain limited capacity to a affordable housing developer based on tax credits, money, et cetera. And so how, like, just choosing one is putting a lot of merit and stock into them. Should they not be available, well, now you've allocated this land and project to a specific person that we don't necessarily know if they're, capable of doing that. So while going through the RFP process may be lengthy and time-consuming, it does bring other people out of the realm that could participate at that time and be more effective.
I guess my whole point is I feel very strongly we don't, because based on what I read, the city's going to get a piece of land very soon.
Correct.
For affordable housing.
Yes.
So we're not waiting a year. We're gonna get that land really soon. We've just gone through the RFP process. Maybe the recommendation is just to give the authority to Karen to hire who she thinks is best fit to go ahead and do that,
I would disagree with that,
and say why.
because what if she chooses BHA?
That's her decision. That's her decision.
Then we haven't wasted 2 years
Yeah,
going through a whole nother RFP, RFQ,
Sure.
da-da-da-da.
And again, these.
We could make a recommendation, Karen, we really think you should talk to POA first based on the outcome of our last discussion.
And I agree with that. Giving it the full autonomy to one person or one entity as the
I
city
don't see
council.
us doing that.
No, I know, but
I don't see it.
if you were to.
I don't even think what we're talking about does that, because what I see this is that we're talking more about a process versus a particular firm.
The process last time resulted in the group with the lower score getting awarded the project.
I understand that.
So the process clearly is not there to be
Well,
an absolute.
the difference is that was a political process and not a business process.
So what are you saying if we go with that route, that we're just going to go with the politics of the moment?
No, we're going with the manager, who
Is what?
Is not an elected official.
is not an elected official.
This can get very complicated.
Is not an
That's
elected
exactly
official.
it. Like,
But I think the elephant.
I'm just trying not to deal in absolutes. And if you have one group already arranged to do this project, then they should be sitting here in our conversation now, because we already have 4 identified parcels, and the next one is coming down
I think
the
that's
pipe.
what Jen is saying. Jen is saying, does it not make sense now that we have, through the RFQ process, these qualified vendors, we'll just call them vendors instead of developers, because through an RFP, you're looking for vendors traditionally, and we already have a qualified pool, so does it not make more sense to invite them to this conversation, whether it's just one or whether it's several, and say, hey, what is your opinion on this site? And then there could be a recommendation from this committee to the city manager that says, hey, when the next site comes available, we think that we would recommend your choice being POA. That doesn't mean that she has to choose POA. That doesn't mean anything. But I think there is the elephant of the room that the reason it took 2 years was because people did not like the original process. The original, my opinion is, and I've said it before, I don't think we should have gone through all of that.
Agreed.
Vote me out, that's okay. But I don't think we should have gone through all of that. The process that was happening was the process that had naturally happened for disposition of city property for 50 plus years. It was the location, it was an emotional process, and so the choice was made to change the traditional process, which is a process that is out of the hands of the masses and in the hands of management.
It only took that long because they changed the process while they were flying the plane.
Well, that was because of the emotional reaction to people feeling like they were blindsided by a process that had been going on for 50 years. There were members of our community who felt like they didn't like the process, when in reality it was the same process that it had gone on with Cottage, with Lafayette, with other municipal buildings. We've gotten rid of many schools, and they've directly gone to PHA as our affordable housing partner. People felt like for some reason, people felt like this one time it was behind closed doors, which in reality, the way that we've done it through years in our city was that exact route.
And so And the last thing I'll say, I promise, is like, is during those city council sessions, when they presented it and people then spoke, one of the critiques of POA's whole organization was that they make too much money. Even though they're a nonprofit, they were getting paid too much. And so now you look at it in the inverse, as PHA is just getting awarded all these projects, of which they are making money from, and now that's
They're a housing authority.
It goes back into the city.
nonprofit.
It doesn't go back into the city.
It goes back into their developments.
Yeah.
Sure, but presumably so do the other peoples because of their
Here's some
nonprofit.
things we cannot decide tonight. We can't redo that process.
No,
It's done.
and by no means, I'm just pointing out
We
some of
can
these.
learn from it. We can try to look at the future city properties and say, what's the best way to do it?
And as we sit here and
That's why
debate, the merits of this process, people are getting pushed out of this city. People who can no longer afford to live here. And sometimes I feel that we lose that perspective when we're sitting around and saying, well, maybe this firm's better than this firm. I mean, the real purpose of this committee and what we're trying to do here is to retain a demographic that is, we're hemorrhaging these people, myself included. Like, I'm fortunate enough to have got in before the city of the open door closed, but that's not the case for most of my peers.
So,
I mean, there's just a variety of components. I agree with you, but there's just so many ingredients in this whole thing. I mean, even with what we just went through, I mean, we're looking 2 years out before, maybe 2 years out, before anything is even available, all right? I don't know that there would be any developer particularly anxious to come back to Portsmouth after what took place with the last process, but that's yet to be determined. You want to invite POA to evaluate property?
They publicly said, after not being chosen, that they would be very interested in coming and developing, because that is their job. So, but I think there has to be something said, and I don't want to beat the dead horse, that emotions drove the change of traditional process in Sherburne. That was maybe the council's emotion, that was members of the community's emotion. It was a new council, a new city manager, and there was this emotional drive to change the process, which then did delay it 2 years. We could have apartments already. So what I don't want to do is ever get into that space again, where we are being so driven by our emotions that we're not looking at the bigger picture. We're not looking at the picture of, we could have 100 units already almost done in development.
I do want to remind you,
I don't know
though,
that for a fact,
as
but-
elected officials, you are representing people, and people do come with emotions and feelings.
I
And so
understand that.
I don't want you to lose sight of that either.
There's no sight loss of that, because I talk to people every single day. There's no sight loss. But sometimes, in that circumstance, I think that we were delayed over the emotions of 250 normal, valuable residents over 10,000 residents who felt an opposite way. And you can't go back in the past, and I'm okay with where we ended. I'm glad that part of that process was this committee. Part of that process was talking to other people coming out that have never been concerned about affordable housing, people coming to a halfway meeting point. But what is concerning is that we have to then keep going. And if no one is satisfied with the way that ended on either end, then we have to look at, well, maybe was it the right way to change our normal course, which is like what John was saying. Like, we changed the course, and if we didn't like it, maybe we should go back to the traditional way, which is through the city manager, through recommendations, and then city manager enacting on chosen policies.
And Jen, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're saying here is, let's use the positives that came out of that process to maintain the momentum.
Right, which is that we've vetted all these other firms. Karen's heard what we have to say about affordable housing. Yeah, so I guess my motion would be to encourage the city council to let the city manager choose a vendor when, I mean, I know we're going to discuss the next city-owned properties, but in my mind, this is most acute because of GNOD.
Yeah. And whatever you're saying, I'm seconding.
Thanks, John.
well, maybe you want to say, recommend to the city manager that she incorporate a development partner.
That would
in the-
be a tough term to use right now. I feel like last time we had one of those that didn't.
Development vendor.
Development partner.
I mean, we're literally.
Affordable housing, work, for like
Right,
a
I mean,
below
that's-
market
there's
rate
that- there's a
partner.
deep an irony in that, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Circle.
yeah.
I don't think we need to get stuck in the weeds on the verbiage of this. We know the intent of what it is.
Yeah.
And just because it's coming through the last process, but like, we just need to move forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And also, what I was going to just suggest earlier, and I'll move forward with this, is maybe we just go back to the old way, which is just like,
That's,
but I'm not saying, I'm saying that now just to reiterate my interest in moving forward, however we can today.
call a question, oh, excuse me, go ahead. Ed.
No, I was just, quote, the old way. Was there previously RFPs that went out for, I mean, it was just the PHA, right?
Right, because they are HUD's associated
Right.
housing authority for our
And
city.
so, but back to Jen's original comment, which was looking to insert POA, and not that I disagree at all, I'm just trying to understand. Inserting POA into this, it's interesting because it's out of that, to your point about like, it's pulling out from whatever just happened in terms of the existing process. Now it's back to the old way, but there's another player.
Well, I would say we had, similar to what was just discussed by the attorney, we had done an RFQ, and I think initially the process was going to be that the city was just going to choose from the RFQ, and we weren't going to even have a proposal. So therefore, if we're going through this new way, we've already had the RFQ, we can just then choose if we wanted to go through with this.
Karen can choose.
Yeah, Karen can choose.
So the recommendation is essentially, dear city manager, given the RFQ and RFP process, use that as your disposition decision. Is that what, essentially, or part of your disposition decision?
Your choice of event, yeah.
Okay.
Call a question, please.
Well, I'm
sorry.
An alternative way to do this would be to say, these are findings the committee's made, that we should go back the old way, and the city manager should consider using one of the vendors qualified by the RFQ process.
I don't like the term going back the old way. I don't know what that really means.
I was using that as short.
Yeah. I mean, I like what Jen had to say, and that's why I seconded it.
Okay, well, then,
I forget what I said, but
Yeah,
hopefully.
I was going to ask you to repeat.
So
Well,
we.
the old way, I think what you mean to say is that the city manager by charter is in charge of the disposition of city property. And so you're asking the city manager to handle the process going forward.
Selecting a partner for below
For
market.
whatever parcels become available in the future.
What if POA says no?
Then they say no.
Then the city manager has 3 other options that have been.
And we don't have any ability to get and look at anything from an RFP process of what visually they want to put on that process?
That's right.
I think
So
that,
we leave that
I
completely
think,
open.
especially when it comes to the GNOD, which again, we'll talk about the other city-owned properties, but that is primarily what I think is most acute in front of us.
Right.
There really are not that many neighbors around there that.
Care what's built.
It's office buildings.
Well,
And
there-
I also don't know that this group should be legislating that.
That's right.
It would go through the typical land use review process.
That's right.
Which
Site
is a
review
public
Yeah.
process. So it's not like they're just going to design something behind doors and build it.
We'd get it to the point where there could be input much more quickly.
That's
Right.
And
Yeah,
I agree.
can you restate what you want us to approve?
Good luck.
wait, didn't you just?
I feel a need for that.
Yeah,
Build it quickly.
I have bits and pieces.
Build it from the people we found out can do it.
Yeah, we conducted an RFP process.
RFQ.
Yeah, I guess I would just
I'm so
recommend that the
confused at this
city
point.
manager, I liked this idea of findings from the committee, I think when I originally said it, it was that the city council recommend the city manager just move forward with a vendor, and that the findings from Sherburne suggested POA would be a great place to start.
Seconded.
Verdict.
I don't.
We're going to be watching this YouTube video for that.
Trying to figure out what was the final
Eric,
decision.
did you?
You can play it back.
Yeah.
No, I just find it, we're leaving a lot of liberties at the discretion of very few individuals that wasn't part of the last process that we went through. There was a lot of community engagement in the Sherburne process. Granted, this site might have different circumstances, but it still has, I think it still should be subject to a public process for whoever wants to participate in it. Well, I'm talking,
That's the
John.
point.
You've had plenty of time to talk this evening, all right? And so I just think there should be, it shouldn't be left at the discretion of a very few people. It should be as much of a public process as possibly can be had. And I didn't mind the last process. It was a little different. It took different, routes in the final end, but that's the way it was.
I think
Yeah, we gotta-
just a reminder is that in our city charter, it is written that the city manager has that authority.
Right.
This was a one-off change that was brought about because of, and I understand the sensitive circumstances of that location, of that school. But I think what I'm hearing from some people, not general consensus, but some people, is that process may have not been or showed that it was not as effective as the traditional methods of disposition of land that has happened in the city that has built affordable or affordable housing as has been done over the last 50 years. I understand not every committee member agrees with that. Maybe not every community member agrees with that. But I think that is what I am hearing as a synopsis, is that we did that as an experiment, essentially. But there are still public, as Tracy has said, there's still public input for any development that happens through site plan development, through planning board, through anything that has to go through ZPA. There's still public input. But what I want to make sure, at least in my opinion, that we get taken away and gets taken off the table is this idea that a community gets to decide exactly what a project looks like. And I think that is where, when we are asking for RFPs, at least with Sherburne and certain things, people are saying, well, what size are the windows are going to be? What is the roof sight line? What is this? What is that? That stuff is left to people who are career builders, career developers, and the people on the planning board who see in ZBA and through TAC and through things like that when we're talking about, what's going to happen with our schools. Well, that gets flushed through TAC. And so going back to more the traditional process of how buildings and developments are approved.
I mean, I agree. I think probably the biggest mistake that happened with this last process, and we can go back to, when you had that first meeting with the PHA and they were coming up with some sort of presentation of what could happen at Sherburne, but I think the city council thinking that they can be developers. You guys aren't. And so I think our process should be one that kind of leans on the experts. So I agree with you there. And I think that would be better overall.
I think for the record, that was the first time I'd ever seen that drawing, too. Was at
Tracy?
that meeting.
One comment which might help the review goal, and correct me if this is no longer the case, but I believe the municipal properties are not subject to our zoning ordinance, although there are courtesy reviews, which, so if these are, it's like, why bother? Just hold your guns, right? So if these parcels are disposed of as a land lease, I do believe that they should be held to the same standards as anyone else developing anything in the city. And that would provide the scrutiny. It is not a quick process to get through the land use boards. It's a 6 months, a year at least. And then if you want to have community design before that, that adds another year or two. And you're looking at, 5 years before you get a building in the ground. I think.
For any project.
Yeah, the land use boards are good and they're strict, and there is a lot of public comment. I think it could be a useful tool.
Can I just, I want to
Make it
agree
quick,
with,
John.
what's that?
John and then Mary.
Yeah, I want to, agree with Joe and with Tracy, and Beth mentioned it earlier about, the land use boards. And let me just give you one example that we have a couple of city-owned properties we're talking about. I kind of think that if we're talking about Commerce Way, there'll be one level of public input. If we try to develop the lower lot, there will be a different level of public input.
Sort of where I was headed with the statement.
So there, there is a process in place, and in many cases, whether you agree or disagree, the location of the property dictates what level of public input. People will come out, they won't come out for Commerce Way, but they will come out for the lower lots. So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think what Tracy said, at some point as a city, we have to stick to our guns. If our goal is redevelopment of some of these lots, we have to stick to our guns and treat everything with the same level of scrutiny and the same, whether it's municipal-owned land or a partnership or X, Y, and Z. I agree with Tracy with that.
I was just
Mary.
going to add that in addition to the normal processes of reviews that are part of government, as part of the RFQ, I think we had questions around community engagement, so that should be also already kind of clarified there. And POA had a very extensive community engagement aspect to their application.
Yeah, they were the best.
Yeah, so
one.
that I
They
think
scored highest.
that's also a good reminder in that there would be opportunity for input, and that's kind of based on the legacy of that RFQ. So there's almost like a two-pronged focus. There's the typical standard process, and then there's the additional one that we included in that to provide that sense of relief and the opportunity for folks to share input.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
And
further
so,
discussion?
and just as a point, I think in the final discussions, so didn't PHA make a plea to say, we're going to have an extensive outreach program. And, that was a factor in, I think, making some type of decision of who the final developer was going to be. But as I understand it right now, I'm kind of disappointed with the fact that PHA's held 2 public sessions and a final session last Monday, and that's it. According to them, that is the end of the public process. If anybody wants to participate, they have to go to planning meetings and so on and so forth. I don't call that a very extensive outreach program, and that's just a comment, so there.
We've got Jen's proposal of our findings before us. And John, you seconded, right?
Dig it, John, yeah.
Dig it.
There were the two of us, 2 seconds.
We're a team.
Yeah. We've got future city properties we're talking about disposing of, the GNOD property, et cetera. So this is timely, this is important. Further discussion on what Jen is proposing, which is essentially, we let the city manager, once the decision made by the council to dispose of it, the city manager goes from there and recommend that, how would you put it?
I guess that take into consideration that POA was highly ranked in the last.
Okay.
But there's no commitment for her to make that decision to POA. She can make a decision amongst the developers that showed up the first time, right? She could
Yes.
She could give it to PHA.
Is this exclusively to the GNOD parcel or any of them?
Any.
I think
I
that
take it as any.
Anything.
Is that the sense that you all have?
That's the sense I have.
Okay. Further discussion? If not, vote to approve those findings?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Abstain?
No, my vote is no.
Okay. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
That was an entertaining one, by the way. Not usually this fiery.
Once you bring up that school, man, we all like each other.
Yeah.
It's like arguing about who makes the best bread pudding at Christmas. We're all
So
getting bread.
what do we need to get done in the next 15 minutes?
Should we?
Payment in lieu, we need to,
I think that might be too much to
We
do
need
in
to-
15 minutes.
well,
I think we just need to hear from Jim.
Yeah. Jim, come tell us to get rid of all the zoning, please.
well, I think we can do payment in lieu. I'd like to see that move along.
Okay.
Have all of you had a chance to read the payment in lieu table?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's recommended by staff that we approve the,
It's
Just-
only for rental, right?
No, it could be either. So Kyle ran the model that he created. He put in the relevant inputs for, he thinks that will be valid for another year, since it's 6 months old.
Okay.
And so there are two things on here. One, you could apply it for each individual unit. So if a developer came forward with studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, you could have them pay out that figure, or you could do the average of each at the AMI level. So I think if you recommended, you would pick either the unit value or the average in this table.
I could use some more clarity. on that.
What is the staff recommendation?
Vote to recommend the city council adopt the payment in lieu fee using the value gap.
Right.
Value
So
gap.
the higher value would be the individual unit as opposed to the average.
Does the GNOD specify AMI? Just like, because this is the only place it would apply right now.
I think we.
No, it
No,
does
I mean,
not
it-
specify AMI.
So how
Right.
do you choose, like, if I were developing the GNOD and I chose to make a payment in lieu, what column do I
It's-
look at?
It's going to specify percentage of units, I think, of a development.
Yeah.
But then if the payment in lieu, I believe, is 10% of the
Right.
units. So then we would apply based off of either an average, right, you guys would have to then tell us, I'm gonna, what AMI that you would be building that,
No, it wouldn't work
Yeah.
because you'd have
You're
to
right.
say like 10% of your units have to be at 80% AMI. You can either build them or you can pay us the 80% column.
Right.
Which is the biggest variable for Portsmouth specifically, and why we run into this exact conundrum is because of the geography and relevancy of our developments. Specifically in the last 3 years, you look at the number of units developed in downtown overlay district versus the Route 1 corridor. And so if you were to compare those two, this is now ineffective.
Are you sure that the GNOD zoning doesn't specify AMI?
Let me open it up.
It doesn't.
I didn't think so.
I think we
All-
purposely.
Left it out because we wanted to give the,
GNOD's the only place it would apply, so it,
right now, yes.
The hope is that GNOD, not the way I sometimes say it, will be replicated in.
Can we do an average of an average?
That's a circular reference, if you were using that in Excel.
I do like the idea of doing it by unit size, because if a developer's coming in and they're making all 3 bedrooms, they should pay a different 10% than if they're making all studios.
Right, so the question is, what do we do between 30% and 110%?
Right.
It's a pretty big spread.
It's a very big spread. I think off the basis, I'm thinking if they're going to be rental units, we're doing it at 60% AMI, and if they're going to be sale units, you're doing it at 80% AMI.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Because
not
those are the,
doubting, but I'm just
yeah,
asking.
I'm just thinking because if I remember the HUD levels correctly, isn't rentals are between 60 and 80, and for sale are between 80 and 100?
80 and 100.
Right, that's
Those
why
are-
I was coming from
Those are
that.
different tax credit applications, however.
I don't disagree, but it's a way to pick a number.
Yes.
How do you, if,
It's what we've used before, too. We've used it in Cinemagic.
if somebody was to come and say, I'm not doing payment in lieu, I'm going to build these puppies, 10% of them, how do you know if they're affordable or not? What's the mechanism for,
Then it falls back to the
It's based on,
gateway.
right, and
It falls
it's
back
through
to
a
what's in
conditional use
gateway.
permit process through the planning board.
It goes, yeah.
And
Now,
it gets
And,
decided
and
that
they
way.
decide through the CUP process?
Now, when you are looking at a value gap, that assumes you have a market rate valuation already established in your pro forma.
No, this is from the RKG
Model,
group,
yep.
and they would update this model every
Yep.
5 years.
Can we go back one, which was that the conditional use permit process would be the mechanic to decide the percentage AMI? Is that what was just said?
If you're building
If
the
you're building.
affordable
Building.
units,
Okay.
they would tell you, okay, you can build 10% affordable, and they have to be 80% AMI.
Okay. How is that different than, oh, because GNOD has it, Yeah.
It falls back to the gateway zoning.
Right.
And so can we repeat the tool or mechanism to establish the market rate? Is it 5 years?
No, the RKG
Kyle-
just goes through and says, this is what,
He
this is
plugs
what
in,
market
yep,
is.
yep.
He plugs it into
He
the
thinks,
model that he built.
he thinks this is good for a year, and then you do it again in a year, and then that would be good for like 2 years. And then but the fee committee adopts fees every year, so, we could update this next year, and then it could be good for 2 years, and then,
Be updated again.
But all he's doing from a rental perspective is saying your average one-bedroom market rate is $2,000, and to be affordable, it needs to be $1,000, and that, or $1,200, and your difference is $800. You put a cap rate on that, and that's the value of a unit.
Yeah, the duration at which it is valid for is the scary part.
But it's, you have to put a
You have to-
number to it, and you just keep updating it.
It's better to have that as a shorter interval.
at the gateway?
Well, one,
Yeah, it's more expensive
Couple
too.
years.
Yeah, it's
20%
better
of
for
the
the
unit.
city to
It's
have.
more expensive too, but yeah.
well, it's in
Are
the
you okay
definition
with-
of
Kyle updating it?
workforce housing.
Yeah. I'm agreeing that it's good and valid now and probably for the next 6 months, but then thereafter, 2 years is probably too long, just generally.
60%.
Yeah.
So to
Rental.
put this in perspective,
100%.
Kittery has a payment in lieu,
Yes.
and it's $100,000 a unit.
So,
They just did a blink.
Blank number.
Peter, did you have the?
But
so-
when you look at that compared to this, these
Yeah.
are pretty big numbers.
Byron?
So it sounds like
That's- yeah.
the GNOD, Peter, you're saying it falls back to gateway.
Right.
And that gateway sets for rental workforce is 60%. So, and that would be for rental, and then for building, it'd be 100%
For sale,
Sale.
yeah.
for sale. So I think
80.
it sounds like that question
80 or
is-
100, I
is
can't remember.
resolved.
Yeah.
Well, that's if you're building.
Thank you.
Peter.
Yeah, it just falls back to gateway.
Right, that's,
But, historically, when we've had developments to come in, they've negotiated different levels and different terms, so.
Through the conditional use
It's a
permit
kind of a-
process.
Then yards
Yeah.
specifically.
so this gives us,
It gives you flexibility on what the
Where that's
developer,
gonna go.
yeah.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, the West End Yards negotiation took 7 months, and that's why
Bit more than
there was a lot of debate. What?
Bit longer than that.
The negotiation specifically for the AMI units.
Yeah.
And so that creates the inflection point of, do you get any units or do you get what you want?
Well, it sounds like in GNOD, you get 10% if they're rentals, 60% for whatever the unit size is. Because that's falls in,
Yeah.
doesn't sound like there's any negotiation there.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's all,
Yeah,
this gives us a table,
yeah.
a reference table to
Yeah.
proceed and have a payment in lieu program. Anything to add, Peter?
No, just,
So,
you know,
so the motion is,
To approve the table.
Recommend
the
the city
motion-
council adopt the payment in lieu of fee using the value gap
gap
table and the unit, how did you?
right,
off
we
of
could just take that, if you just want to just go by unit size, we could take this last line off, the average.
It'd be by unit size.
By unit
Kyle was just
size.
showing, how you could do it.
Is it better to just approve the gap table, or is it better to approve Kyle's model going forward? Like some sort of, I mean, does it need to come back in terms of?
So the
yeah.
model is owned by the city. They
Yep.
did all that work, and we just asked them to plug in and
The
update
numbers.
the numbers.
Right,
for
well, I'm
us.
just saying, is it better for us to just say,
I think it's pursuant to.
yeah, just keep doing this?
Well, it's going to be part of the fee committee.
just
So
gonna
we
say.
met earlier today,
Okay.
right, at fee committee. And so it'll be part of the fee
Annual
committee.
review.
Annual review by staff,
Okay.
recommended to fee committee, who then moves it forward as
There's
part
a-
of the budget
There's a
process.
process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does this,
Ready?
Yes. Andrew?
does this assume that we are probably doing away with incentivized zoning?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
That's a good question, but no.
It's either or, I
This
think.
is specific to the GNO.
Right.
Okay.
To this overlay district that we
Yeah.
just created.
Any other discussion or debate? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Who made that motion?
Did you see, wow.
I can have made it again. That's
Jen, I think Jen did actually sort of.
I read it.
She read it out loud.
Read it a couple times.
All
Would
right.
it be time for public comment before? I know we have a few things left on the agenda, but
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think we're gonna get to those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 o'clock stuff.
That'll be the,
Ditto.
how you guys feel, but we could do public comment now and get Jim's
Yes.
input. and
Can we
then-
just real quick talk about February 27th? Are we having another meeting?
No, we were going to propose to you
Right,
that
for New Hampshire.
we have a meeting.
That's,
I will
is that
not
school
be here.
vacation week?
It is school vacation week.
Yeah, that's gonna be tough.
Yeah.
Okay, not a
I
good
know
date.
planning board, we have a work session.
We already have a work
Yep,
session at
for
planning board as
board.
well that night. Wipe it off the table.
So proposed was a good word, John.
6
That one
p.m.
flew apart.
6 p.m. Planning board's talking about zoning that night, so
I had that.
I'm already going to be in a meeting talking about zoning.
He says no.
But Tracy had said at our last meeting, we need to figure out our goals for the year.
Just a little softer.
Yes.
You know.
And then we
Yeah.
can all swat it down.
We had thought that's better done in a work
did.
session, not in our regular meeting time. And we'll try, we can try and find a date that works for it.
Maybe we can send out a doodle, because I know Peter sends the doodles.
Peter's a good doodler.
Yeah.
But not school vacation
Invite our
week.
public.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Our public,
Public comment.
Come on up.
wait, there might be somebody on
down.
Zoom, we don't know.
Let me see.
No.
Have
No,
anybody on Zoom?
no, there's Tim. Our ratings are really low these days.
I like it that way.
State your name for the record.
Yeah, who are you?
Jim Smalley, at 352 Kearsarge Way. Regarding the trust, especially the loan, stay within your circle of competence matters. So trustees are going to lack the underwriting skills that banks have. So partnering with a bank for underwriting makes most sense. I wasn't clear on whether the trust fund is going to be self-sufficient, in terms of funding as a perpetuity. Getting the trust second draft, back to me makes sense. I mean, when I've looked at trusts in the past, or had to be part of them, working with them, we always get that final. We always look at it before it's signed off on. Does it ultimately reflect the intent of the committee? Right? You want to know that that's the case. This one's just, suggestion regarding disposition of the city's properties, picking POA next, brings efficiencies. It's a great idea. You have greater flow through potential just from that suggestion. The only question I have is, can the city decide, the council decide that they want to be involved and override that decision? I don't know. Let's see here. Council meeting on, this is something that struck me the other day. There was a council meeting on sheds. And just to paraphrase one of my favorite guys, the rent is too damn high. The zoning is too prohibitive. When it came to the sheds, there was this big, long discussion. It went on for like 30 minutes. Do we have one? Do we allow more than one? It has to be this height. It has to be this wide. It has to be this tall. We can only have one or two or three. Have to be this color. Have to have a fence this high. Why? Why all the complexity? Why all the ultimate management? It is unbelievable to me. It's not getting rid of zoning, as much as I think that would be a good start. It's the zoning that restricts the supply, that adds cost, that delays time and money. Time is money. And it's this type of micromanagement that's a killer. And it's not just with the sheds. It was with McNabb's proposal, the last time we met. They couldn't do the two buildings together because the zoning doesn't allow for that size of a footprint. You've had the developer with the I think it's the steam factory, I can't remember that one. He was going to put in 3 additional workforce units. Nope, because of potential opposition, right? So you lose when you create risk. It's a net loss. And that has to be, please take that into consideration. The market rate units are going to drive, other than the city properties, market rate units will drive workforce units. It's not the other way around. The more market rate units you get, the more workforce units you're going to get. So look to find ways that minimize, Andrew used, I think, the term burden, but you want to minimize that incentive, which is really just a cost, and find a way to make these, instead of getting 5 or 10%, get it closer to the 15 or 20. And I think that's about it. Oh, the last thing would be if there can be a working session, why not? Right? I think that was item 6 or something on that agenda.
Yeah, and one of the considerations that Joanna and I had was that there be a chance for housing advocates or folks involved in housing to speak to us, like you, like others who are active in.
It does bring in more citizen involvement or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, that's my 3
Thank you.
cents worth.
Thank you.
Thank
That was
you,
a good
Jim.
nickel.
Someone's making a profit.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Wait, excuse me.
Yes, Mr. O'Leary?
I had sent in a message to the two of you because I was told I was supposed to go through the chair on the message that we got from Mr. Hewitt, we all got it, about the does PHA have any other opportunities, and should we have a discussion with them? I would like to suggest that we invite PHA to come to one of our next couple of meetings and have a discussion on that matter.
On efficiency?
No,
On redevelopment of their own.
of their own. Are there any, I believe if I understood the message, I mean, it may have addressed a couple of things. Are there any existing PHA properties where there is opportunity for expansion?
Right.
And one of those, as most of us know, there was discussion a few years ago about doing something Gosling Road, Woodbury Avenue, on property that they own there. Should we have a discussion, as opposed to, the message that I got was, as opposed to giving away city land, quote unquote, should there be a situation where PHA has property available to them, and should we try to incentivize them to do something with their own property as well as city property?
The last link in the document that I shared with everyone is a project in Somerville, Massachusetts, doing that exact thing.
Yeah.
And POA is doing
At
it.
POA, I did know that.
There are no reasons why PHA cannot do that over building something new as well.
Yeah.
And it gets us to 500 units, which is what we're trying to do.
Anyways,
So why don't we plan on maybe inviting them in April, so that, because we didn't get through,
yeah.
some of these things. So in
Perfect.
March, we'll finish this agenda, and if there's anything else that people would like to add, and then we will send out the invitation to the Housing Authority to get an update on what they are thinking for any repurposing
And
of the
just,
current.
and just a suggestion, probably just because it's where it came to me anyways, share with them the messages from Hewitt, so knows the context, that's all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you brought this up a while ago. I think other people have brought it up a while ago, so it's, you know what I mean?
It's
Well within.
bubbling out there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Our next meeting is March 13th.
March 13th.
Great.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.